Welcome everyone to session 2 of day 2 of St. Louis Startup Week 2024. Today I'm going to be introducing our wonderful panel. Our moderator is Leena Choudharry. She's a first-generation Asian American entrepreneur, best-selling author, and founder of Placement Expert USA. Leena shares her journey in creating positive change through entrepreneurship. Leena is joined today by Al Lee, the CEO of Artis Commercial Capital, Shayn Prapaisilp, COO of STJ Group Holdings, and Dr. Mimi Vo, a double board certified doctor in internal medicine and obesity medicine and co-founder of Vida Aesthetics. Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome, everyone. Entrepreneurship is a loaded word. It can manifest itself in several different ways. As a women entrepreneur myself, and my journey has been full of challenges, and some of you here have been witness to that firsthand, all the struggles and also the successes. So let's dive deep into the factors that can make or break a business, and especially from the Asian American perspective. That's what we are gathered here for today. Without further ado, I would like that each of my panelists here share a quick summary of their current entrepreneurial venture, and then from there on, we'll dive further deep into more aspects of it. I have just one quick request. Please keep maybe your responses to 3 minutes so that we have enough time for questions at the end from the audience here too. Thank you, everyone. We're getting started. So. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Mimi, and I am an owner of the Vo Medical Clinic that was started by my father, and I used to work there as a secretary, as a kid, and took over his practice probably about 15 years ago, and then 2 years ago we started Vida Aesthetics and Wellness, which is a medical spa in St. Louis. But I grew up watching my parents have businesses since I was a child. My mom owned Chinese restaurants, and I remember creating my own newsletter and selling it in the neighborhood when I was like 7, and would like sell my mom's old things and walk around the neighborhood and try to sell it in the back of like a little luggage that I would lug around. So just always loved business, and being an entrepreneur has always been a dream of mine. And so really thankful that I had really good role models in my parents to look up to, and doing it now. So.
Thank you, Mimi. I'm Al Lee. So I have 25 plus years in corporate finance and banking is really my core competency. I started my lending company back in June of 2022 at the beginning of increasing interest rates, which was the worst time to start a lending company. From there, pivoted to doing different things as well. I also am a general partner for a real estate syndication company. So really over the past couple of years, it's really been about trying to find focus, and after seeking all of the entrepreneurial opportunities in finance as an entrepreneur, because typically finance jobs are within a corporation. And when I found there was an avenue for me to kind of go off on my own, I took it, even though it was the worst time to do it. But it's been a great ride, and I'm happy to be here to share about some of the things I've learned here.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Shayn Prapaisilp. I would probably say entrepreneurship found me. I did not think I was going to be in this particular job. I went to school to be an attorney, which I'm glad I am not, because my brother's an attorney. I see his life, and it's very, it's a lot of work. But not to say that what I'm doing here is, it took me a while to really decide that this was for me. I moved back to St. Louis in 2014. I was in Chicago at the time, and with my family's business, we're in hospitality, grocery stores and restaurants. And at the time, my parents were invited to pitch a new grocery concept with WashU. And they were going up against some national brands you guys might know of for a kind of a specialty market. And they're like, we are good at the operations. We don't really know this marketing stuff, this pitch, so can you come down and help? We ended up getting the space, and I started doing the Chicago to St. Louis Southwest flights every week. figured out that it's actually something that's really impactful. Besides, I always have a really important 9 to 5, but I'm really passionate about St. Louis as a region. I grew up here. So St. Louis is very core to my identity, and I've wanted to make it better. And so after spending time on the East Coast in Chicago, I just felt like coming back to St. Louis was something that was the best use of my time, not just professionally, but socially, politically, et cetera. And so I kind of tried as much as I can to meld the two together. And so that was my 10th year with the company. And not just to make a profit, but to kind of make an impact is what really drives me day to day.
Thank you. So as an Asian American entrepreneur, when you made those choices, as I hear from all of you that you had other choices or other career paths, but you chose to do business, what were some of those turning points? And then what challenges did you face firsthand? And in those challenge moments, did you reach out to the Asian American community or the community here at large? If you can address this, I think that's something every business owner faces, and I myself have gone through that, but it takes time to get to that point where you understand or you are facing a challenge and these could be the people you could lean on to. Thank you.
Sure. So I'm really lucky to be a physician for a largely Asian American community. I would say 90% of my patients are Vietnamese Americans, and I'm very thankful that my mom made me speak the language when I was little. So I knew how to speak Vietnamese, and because she was a singer, I learned how to read karaoke, so I could read and write Vietnamese as well. Initially, when I finished medical school and residency, I became a hospitalist working for the hospital in Houston and then to Mercy Hospital, thinking I would never probably own my own practice. I grew up watching my dad bring loads of charts home, working on them late at night, and the struggles that he had as a business owner, and thought, maybe it's not for me. But fast forward a few years, he needed help, so I went out and started working with him in the office, and I really found my passion. I really felt, it's not just about the money. That's great, but it was about the fact that I was making a difference in a community where a lot of my patients don't speak English, and I felt that impact was the biggest part. And so I was immersed in this Asian American community, not so much, as an aside. So that was actually what made it for me. This is cemented that this is why I went into medicine. This is why I learned my language, and I'm really just very fortunate and lucky to be a part of helping the medical care for this particular population of people.
So for me, I've worked in corporate my entire life. Like I said, 25 plus years. Had actually pretty good success there as well. My last stop was at Regions Bank, and I was doing international finance. And I was actually a top 10% producer. The CEO knew me. I had the best boss I've ever had the best boss's boss I ever had. I had the best market. On my team, I had the biggest territory and everything. I had the biggest clients. It was great, but I was dying inside for me. And I just wasn't growing, and my boss could tell I wasn't happy, and he and I are really good friends as well. And I tried to stay as long as I could, but I was dying on the inside. I mean, really was getting very, very unhappy, despite the success. And I think what I realized, I need to grow. Like, I don't have the responsibilities like kids and things like that. So there was really no reason to play the safe route for me. So I was like, well, why am I playing the safe route? I've got the opportunity, because I'm older and don't have responsibilities, means I have money and I can take the risk. And so I just jumped. And again, at the worst time to actually start a lending company, as inflation was around the corner. But I wouldn't trade it for anything. So it's been challenging because there's a million different type of loan products out there. And when I was at Regions Bank, I sold maybe 3 things. That's it. But when I decided to open up my own lending company, I was like, oh, I can do this, I could do that, I could do this, I could do that. I can make loans in Seattle, I can go to Miami, I can do I actually can do international lending, right? I was all over the map, but for those of you who are first-time entrepreneurs, you quickly realize you have to focus on a few things. So I went from having too few products as a corporate guy, to having too many and too big of a region, the whole world, and that wasn't benefiting me either. So I really had to focus on which things I was going to, what kind of lending products I was going to focus on, and what markets I was going to penetrate. So that's kind of been my journey from leaving corporate to where I am now.
Mimi and I were kind of chatting earlier, but I think whatever line of work that you guys are going to pursue or what type of company you're going to found, nothing stays static, right? The way probably your dad practiced medicine is different the way you do, and people don't think of grocery as a dynamic industry. And kind of when I stepped into the company, it was very much being run in the same way my parents have run it since 1975, and so I kind of looked at this and I said, right now our clientele seems to be primarily immigrants, refugees, or folks who are familiar with the food, and we saw an opportunity. I think I kind of came into the industry at the right time where food was becoming more than just sustenance, right? It became a lifestyle. Chefs were becoming influencers and celebrities, and so we saw an opportunity to market ourselves not just as the Asian market, the ethnic market, so to speak. Kind of, we don't like that. It's an outdated term to us, but being a first-generation American millennial, right? My Monday I'm eating Indian food, Tuesday I'm going to Vietnamese, Wednesday I'm eating Mexican. So I'm like, if this is my diet, we have an opportunity to market ourselves to more than just the Asian or European or South American communities. And so with our market, Global Foods, people are like, and we've had folks come in from the coast and New York and bigger markets, and they're like, wow, in New York, there's the Chinese market and the Indian market, and it's kind of segmented. They have these neighborhoods where they go to their kind of specific place, and they're like, when you guys say global, it's truly global. We have everything from, Western European, and they'll go up to my dad, they're like, have you tried any of this? He's like, no, I just talk to my customers and I ask them what they want. And so we've been able to kind of really be this niche market, and we have some original customers, like I'm sure your parents, but we were able to market ourselves to a new generation. And whenever there's transplants that come to St. Louis, they're so happy that they have this resource, because they didn't know what to expect when they came to St. Louis. And I've always said that we punch beneath our weight in our food scene. I mean, or punch above our weight, I should say. And so just be able to be a part of that and kind of push the envelope forward. I always joke that, in St. Louis, it's weird. Everyone's grocery store is someone's last name. So it really is a kind of a family enterprise, and I think that's a cool thing. It's something really personal, and the folks who feed us really care about the region.
Great, thank you. Shayn, I actually make a great point talking about how you started into the family business. That kind of leads me into my next question, especially Mimi and Shayn, because you both also kind of inherited your family business, right, and took on that. So as a second generation, what were some of the challenges? Because I moved here after, so I learned business from my dad, and then I moved here. So I had to start from scratch, and I did not have that family support. And there are many first-generation immigrants like that who do that, but you had at least some foundation to start with. So can you talk about what might be the challenges? Because I know as Asians, family comes first. So I'm sure there are different ways you did business than maybe how I do business. So if you can please.
So I think family coming first was the reason I came into the practice. My dad kind of roped me in by saying, you could, I know you're making a lot at Mercy, but for this amount, you can come work for me and be less hours. And so then he started paying me. And like a year later, he then gave me all the books. He's like, I think it's time for you to take over. And then I realized he didn't pay himself for a whole year so that he could give me what he thought I, needed to be paid for to rope me in. But the biggest challenge has been, growing up here, I've had a better life than he had, coming from war-torn Vietnam, leaving, at the end of the war. And so his mentality of we need to open 7 days a week. We need to be open weekends. He worked 7 days a week for 20 years. And when I started having kids, I was like, I can't do that. And he's like, why do you need 2 days off a week? And I'm like, but I need 2 days off a week. So that struggle was the back and forth between his saying, if you close on weekends, we're going to go out of business, and then me having to say, hey, it's going to be okay, so kind of that back and forth between the first generation and the second generation mentality, and then also taking risks. I wanted to open a medical spa. I wanted to, I identified that in South City, there's no medical spa. There's not a lot of med spas where people look like myself or people of color. So it was bringing in and looking for devices and laser machines and things that would help, hair removal, tattoo removal, and people of color. And so that risk, it was also hey, Dad, I'm going to do this, and him being like, are you sure? Maybe you shouldn't. Let's just stay in our lane. I'm like, no, this is what I'm going to do. So I think that being that second generation, having the ability to step on the shoulders of another giant has been really helpful for me in that regard.
Yeah, I think kind of similar to Mimi. I mean, I would say my dad took a huge risk. So my extended family owns J International Foods, which I'm sure some of you know. It's on South Grand still to this day. And he is one of the younger ones of like 9 kids, and Asian families are very hierarchical, patriarchal, whatever. So, he had all these ideas, and, being kind of the younger brother, they weren't really being listened to. And so, just for, him and my mom were like, this will be fine. Like, if we stay here, we'll have a decent life. It will be what it will be. But he was like, I want more. And so he took a big risk by kind of going out on his own, opening Global Foods in 1999. And it was a big risk. I mean, if we didn't make that work, that was kind of it. My mom was like, we'll go back to Thailand. We'll be family there. It was almost like a risk of last resort, and it ended up being, being able to provide me and my brother, my sister, first-rate education, really setting us up to where we are today. And it's always kind of funny because my dad's been here now officially longer in the States than he's been in Asia. So when he's in Asia, he's like, gosh, like Asians are just like, they don't line up. There's no order. And then when he's here, he's like, in Asia, like the trains like get you here in like 2 hours, and like Amtrak is terrible. I'm like, it's just really funny. He really has a dual identity, where it's a foot in each world. But I think for him, it's the opportunity to open a business here. I think my parents both say, and many Asian countries again are very, strict patriarchally. If you don't know the right people, it's really hard to go out on your own. And they said if they didn't leave for the States, they were lower middle class, if not poor, in Asia, and here they've been able to completely reach the American dream. And so kind of the way I look at it is that, it's almost incumbent on me to not just maintain, but to continue to take risks, to continue to grow the business. It's one of those things where I'm always embarrassed because I'll meet some folks who are older than me, and they're like, we love your parents. And I'm like, I have no idea who you are, but that means a lot to me that they for them, when they made their American journey over, our business was there to nourish them, and to keep that legacy alive is extremely important to me.
So, just talking about model minority myth, right? We all either have gone through that, or we've seen someone go through that. Is that really for you? How did that apply? Is that true, or would you have any takeaways for the audience here on how to handle that? Being a minority, because again, Asian families, talking about that, you become that child who everybody is looking up to within the family also. So if you could talk a little bit about that.
So I grew up in Webster, and was the only Asian kid in my class, other than my cousin. And I I honestly didn't feel much different than anybody else, and I think that was just maybe me, just thinking, there was no difference. And it wasn't until I got to college where I kind of felt like, oh, okay, I am a minority here. And I think that, and that was in Kansas City. I went to medical school, the 6-year medical program there. But then I was put in a class of 100 kids where half of us were also, minorities. So then I didn't really feel that as much growing up. I think that I see that among friends and among others that I am around. But I think that's definitely there, for sure. But I didn't have as much of a feeling.
So similar. I grew up I was in grade school in St. Charles, which was really interesting. You'd think Webster's weird. Yes, I was in St. Charles from basically grade school, kindergarten, all the way through 7th grade. And definitely felt odd and different being there. And we're talking, I'm gonna date myself, we're talking about the 70s here, so, and early 80s. So St. Charles is a lot more diverse now than it used to be back then. But I think the main, in that paradigm of a model minority myth, I really saw it in my dad, because my dad was an engineer at Boeing. My dad's a very quiet man, like most engineers, but yeah, the Asian part of it, he's even more quiet, right? So, and he just put his head down and just worked, and I think he experienced certain things that weren't favorable to, his ethnicity and his race while I was at Boeing back in those days. Because as I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do, because my sister went to go be a physician, right? Just that's the first thing that almost every immigrant Asian family tries to get their kids to be, is be doctors. Not doctors and lawyers. Well, I wasn't gonna be either of those. In fact, I was trying to be a musician, which was like really bad. So, and I wasn't really good at anything. So, so it really, business was gonna be the route I was gonna go. But I remember early on, my dad said, don't go into business. Business is for white people.
Wow.
So that was his paradigm. That was his worldview as he was working in corporate at Boeing. That if we're gonna do anything, can't be in business. You have to be like an engineer. You have to be a lawyer. You have to basically be a white collar laborer type of thing, if that makes sense, right? Get an advanced degree and all that. And so that really shaped me. And but I think also growing up in St. Charles, going to University of Missouri, and I went to Mizzou when there was less than 1% of students that were Asian. Now it's over 10%, which is pretty incredible. But when I was there, I was pretty much the only one, even at Mizzou. So I actually got used to being around white people and relating with people that weren't Asian. So that was kind of normal for me, which really kind of helped me get into business and really enjoy a pretty successful career. So that's kind of how that whole dynamic of race influenced me.
Yeah, I think to Al and Mimi's point, I always hesitate to, Asian American is not a monolith, right? So it depends on generation, so it's funny, my parents were like, what is Asian American? They're Thai. They see themselves as Thai. And I think Asian American is I see it a lot with my generation, first gen, born here, just because, to their point, there weren't a lot of us, so we kind of had to stick together. But yeah, my family again, stressed education, I'm sure like your families did, and so they did everything to put us in the best possible position. So, I went to private school for a long, long time, and when my family moved to Frontenac, I ended up at a great high school. My brother went to Burroughs, all that. So we in my parents' mind, they've achieved the American dream, for us at least. And it's been very interesting, at least speaking from my experience. When I was there, it was, probably 5 or 6% Asian American, and I didn't feel as othered there as I did in other places. But St. Louis has changed so much now, and I went back to my cousin's graduation at the same high school 4 years ago, and I kind of joked that, when you got to the X's and Y's part of the names, that list went on for a really long time, and that's just, again, places change, things change. But it's funny, for me, it's when I went out to school on the East Coast, there was a lot of Asians, and I'm like, these East Coast Asians are different. These West Coast Asians are different. I'm a Midwest guy, so I'm just like, these people are strange to me. And so I always hesitate to say, the Asian experience is so vast, and most of my friends that I met in college were from the Midwest. So one of my best friends was from Iowa City, and Chicago people made more sense. But in St. Louis, I think too, and it's been concerted. Al and I sit on different organizations' boards that have made a point of, we've always been in St. Louis, but we haven't been visible. And kind of going back to what I talked about earlier, is that it's great to come here and be safe and be secure and build a life for yourself. But what are you doing after 5 o'clock that is making it better for other people? And kind of my guiding light is that we've been very, very lucky. It's really rare in one generation to go from immigrant to finding success, or whatever your version of the American dream is. So I feel like it's incumbent on those of us who are able to try to pay, bring the ladder down. Don't pull it up once you get there, because it's one of those things where who knows who the next, Satya Nadella or all these luminaries that we have in this country is so lucky to have. Who might that be? And it's not always obvious. It's not always the MIT engineer. It might just be an immigrant with nothing on their back. And so keeping that in mind and casting that Asian experience as wide as possible is super important.
Thank you. So, Al, I would start with the story that you just shared about your dad, being very quiet and, not being in business. So my journey into the business world especially, and the networking piece is what I wanted you all to address on. Because for me as a business owner, the moment I started networking and I met with Al at the Asian American Chamber of Commerce, I see Omar Malik here, the president. So that was a segue for me, or a point. And at that time, Al was the president. So he pushed me. He gave me that opportunity to shine. And I was not sure about myself. There was no roadmap. But then that's when I started to really understand the importance of maybe being active and volunteering in things which may not be related to my business. But I know since then, and even now, I'm part of, again, just like Shayn, you all are part of many different boards and many different organizations. There is value to that. And I think as Asian Americans, as you said, I think the previous generation that came, they were very quiet. They thought that you have to be quiet, you don't have to be vocal about what you do, whether it is professional or a business. So I want to understand from all of you, how have you networked? What are some of the things that the audience here can take from networking in your industries? Thank you.
So I love just to meet everyone. So Leenna called me one day, is like, would you like to have lunch? I'm like, sure. So I'm always up for, meeting everyone, getting to know everyone, networking as well. Volunteering, whether it be for the school PTO and getting to know everybody there, or through, I helped out with the St. Louis Ballet for a time. And just honestly, curious. I started as an introvert, where as a kid, didn't want to talk to anybody, didn't know how to talk to anybody, and I chose a profession where I have to sit 30 times a day with 30 different people and hear stories from people. So I've gotten really good at listening and speaking, and genuinely curious as to everybody's story, and I think everyone has a story to tell. Yeah. And so that has been how I've learned to network and get to know everybody in St. Louis.
So I think one of the things that we try to impress at the Asian American Chamber of Commerce is networking is actually a skill. that you have to learn. You don't just show up and be good at it. And especially, I don't mean to peg everybody in the same hole or anything, but Asian Americans or Asian immigrants, they sometimes their mentality is they show up and their mentality is, okay, I'm here, what can you do for me, right? But as you know, for those of you who are well networked, it's really, you show up to a group or a community or a support area, you want to go into it saying, okay, what can I do for the people I meet here today? Because when you have that mentality, you actually follow through with that, it actually comes back to you. It really does come back to you tenfold.
Yeah.
So I think that's the important thing, is really understanding that it's a skill. And we actually had training for that at AACC breakfast seminars, right? I brought in a guy that I learned a lot from Washington University, a guy named Frans van Oudenalen. I called him Yoda. And he really taught specific skills on how to network, right? And because a lot of times, in general, the Asian community tends to not be as vocal and not as outgoing. But that's one of the things we try to do at the AACC. We want to kind of try to reverse that kind of behavior. It's time for us to be loud as an Asian community. It really is, because we have something unique to share in America. And so I really encourage you guys to join the AACC if you haven't been a part of that, and really support one another, and because that's kind of, and the thing that all of us, what I'm really proud to see is a lot of us are now not only being successful in our companies and places where we work, our businesses that we own, but we're also serving on boards. We're having an impact on St. Louis, right? So I'm actually more proud of the boards I'm on than the work I do. And the work that I do is really facilitating the impact that I'm making in the state and my city.
Yeah, just to piggyback on Al, I think it's important to not just join boards and be engaged, but to agitate for yourselves to be in places where they don't see Asian faces, right? So I serve on boards where I'm not only the only Asian, I'm like the only person under 50. So it's important to be in those spaces too, spaces where they don't expect Asians to be. It'd be really easy for me to just join a restaurant association, and a lot of Asians own restaurants, so it's really easy for me to be in community there. But when I'm at the racket club and I'm the only the only Asian person there in a white space, that's important too, to be visible and to say, to make decisions, you have to be at the table, and a lot of times it's uncomfortable for me. I've been in spaces where they're like, "Are you staff?" I'm like, "No, I'm the chair of this organization," and they're like, "Oh, we thought." Because of your age and your race, and they're like, "No, I'm the chair. This meeting's with me." And St. Louis can be hard. It's changing though. I think again, it's part of making yourself visible and taking that risk. But only way you can affect change is to be part of that conversation.
And if I can add to that one more thing, embrace the difference.
Yeah.
Just go for it, right? I think the most awkward thing I've ever done, the scariest thing I've ever done, I ride a Harley, which is really weird for an Asian guy. But you know what's even weirder is driving that Harley as the only Asian guy going to Sturgis up in South Dakota. That was uncomfortable. But you got to embrace it, right? Embrace that the fact, don't try to blend in, right? It's time for us to stick out now, and because it's good. And so you have a lot of us here to support you in that way.
I think when my dad, when I was growing up, he would say, "You're really lucky. You have two different cultures. You're an American. This is a part of your culture, but you're also Vietnamese, and that's a part of your culture. So take the best from both. There's goods and bads of every culture and every person, but take the best of what you are and make that your own, as an Asian American." And I think that that's really what has been very good advice for my success today.
So I'm gathering that it is embrace the best of both worlds in order to be successful. Great. So I'm going to lead into my next question. which is about, I was a bit intentional picking each one of you, to be honest, because each one of you belong to a different industry. So within each of your industry sectors, I would love for you to talk about what your current challenges are and what are you doing in your own Asian American perspective, if you're bringing in that, and how are you changing things?
So for me and where we are, our practice, my medical practice and my medical spa is on South Grand, because this was an area where Vietnamese immigrants initially came to America. They were around the Cherokee, South Grand area, and that's why, Chain International and a lot of different diverse restaurants and businesses are. So that was, in 1975, 1980. Today, the community is much more broad. So no longer are we down in the South City area. So it's a challenge trying to decide, do I stay in South City? But I do love the fact that we are in an area that is underserved for medical reasons, but also for, from the medical spa, medical aesthetics point of view, bringing, aesthetics and wellness to an underserved area. So I think that is difficult for me to decide what to do next from that standpoint, or maybe it is going to be opening a second location so I can serve close to where people currently live, and also for those who still are in the area. So that's probably my next challenges to decide.
Yeah, so my background, again, is in financial services, which is not really well represented in terms of Asian representation in financial services, especially in commercial banking. And in fact, when I was at Regions, I probably shouldn't say that since this is being recorded, but we have over 20,000 employees, and I might have been a top 10 highest ranking Asian person in the whole bank. And it really wasn't that high of a position either. But it just goes to show the financial services industry has really fallen behind in inviting Asians to be a part of this, which is really kind of strange, because if they actually do their research, they'll realize that Asian Americans have the highest per capita income in America, even above Caucasian Americans. We're also the most highly educated within America in terms of that demographic. So they're catching up now, they're trying to catch up, but I left because there was no upward mobility for me there. And like I said, I needed to grow. And so what was really funny, when I decided to go off on my own to open up my own commercial lending practice, I went to this training program up in New York. And I had this ambition, okay, I'm gonna open up the largest Asian-owned alternative lending company in the country. That was kind of my mindset. And so I showed up to this training room, and it was about 12 people there, and I was the sixth Asian to show up in this room. Wow. And so it's really interesting. There's a lot of talent among the Asian Americans, or Asian immigrants in the financial services industry, but it's in the alternative space. It's not in the mainstream financial services, which is quite a shame. And that to me is a miss for the mainline financial services companies that are out there.
So the other half of our business are restaurants, which I'm sure you guys all know the last 4 or 5 years is probably one of the more tumultuous industries to be in. And in St. Louis too, I think you see there's always churn, but what you're seeing is a lot of Asian restaurants that are closing, not because they're not successful, it's because the parents who work their butt off want their kids to go be doctors, lawyers, and engineers because the work is really, really hard. And we've seen a few instances of that the past few years, and it's tough. Another trend I'm seeing is that among Asian Americans, who started off their careers in white-collar industries, there's a real sense of burnout, and so they're looking to pivot. Some of them look into restaurants. I always try to tell them, if that's what you want to do, great, but don't think it's going to be any less stressful than coming from Deloitte. It's still going to be really, really hard. But yeah, I think, again, it's definitely the most difficult part of our business. It's just, it's only gotten tougher for multiple reasons, but I feel like it's important. Again, King and I was the first Thai restaurant in St. Louis, and I remember we had to give pad Thai away to sample because people were like, "What is this?" They had never had pad Thai before. And now with our portfolio of 2 Japanese, 2 Thai restaurants, we're proud to be able to continue that. We've, again, Mimi kind of mentioned, like, the Asian community is not just in 1 or 2 neighborhoods anymore. They're, I grew up in West County, Webster, South County, increasingly St. Charles. I mean, the best South Asian food is in Maryland Heights and Chesterfield. Like, you kind of follow the good school districts, and that's where the Asian restaurants are opening up. And so, it's a really tough industry. We're really lucky that we kind of balance that with our international markets, which are a little bit more stable. But gosh, what we have available in St. Louis today, it's not just Chinese food or South Asian food. It's like Northern Indian, it's Sichuanese, it's Yunnan. It's so kind of where we are now. I would not have imagined this growing up here in St. Louis, 15, 20 years ago. This is the diversity we have, and we're real lucky to have that.
Okay, so we're almost getting to the end of this, but I do want to ask one question. I mean, I understand all of us here, we had the education, we had resources to support, and Al, you're again in financial industry. So I see if somebody comes, and a lot of immigrants come to the country, they don't know the language, but they have that desire, like you had that, right? That you want to do something of your own, don't want to do a job. How do those people find out what are the financial resources and where they can get? Or legal, because I've heard about so many cases about businesses falling trap, right? And then though they had a good business plan, but things went wrong somewhere because legally they were not secured. A friend of mine just, she opened a restaurant in a partnership, and the partner took away the money and literally kicked her out of the business. And this happens a lot. This is a restaurant business. So what do they do in order to, especially in this day and time, when there is so much information available online, but people either not reach, and then again, I think as a small business owner, I myself running a staffing agency, we also provide digital marketing services. I think Asian Americans, again, this could be part of that minority myth, where we don't want to even advertise our business or don't understand the value of that digital marketing aspect, because these days, you're not going to just, next door store, you're probably looking it up online first. So can you all talk about that a little bit? Thank you.
So when I was growing up, I know back in the day, it was the International Institute. So we kind of grew up kind of around the International Institute, going there for harvest, lantern festivals and things. So it was really great to have our culture be a part of that. And I think that was a great resource for those in my parents' generation to network and meet people. Fast forward to today, I think the newer generation that comes from Vietnam anyway are usually here for college or here because they have family here. And I think that network of Vietnamese Americans is very, very helpful. And I'm always, when I do talk to those who are starting business or wanting to start business, I always say, hey, it shouldn't just be a handshake. Get a contract, get an attorney, have it written down, because we see problems like this often, whether it be real estate, buying real estate in Vietnam, and then now, it was all through a handshake and now there's problems. So those are things that I would say, back in the day, it would just be all verbal, but, let's have things written down. Let's kind of learn from mistakes that have happened over the last few, years.
Yeah, so I was on the board of the International Institute CDC, and for a period of time. And what was really interesting there was with all the so they had microloans for immigrants as well as refugees, and different rates. The refugee loans were at a 0% cost basis, so they can offer really low rates. But if you're an immigrant, you can also benefit from some loans there. What was really interesting was the CDC at the International Institute, a lot of their loans was to the non-Asian community, even though there was a lot of outreach to the Vietnamese community. And what we found out was that the Vietnamese community were kind of helping each other. and they were just making loans to each other. So I think being part of a community, finding people you can trust within your community, that's really where you want to find your capital for your startup business. That's where you start. And hopefully, once you start generating revenue, the banks aren't lending to startups either. The SBA does have some startup money, but you have to have experience in that industry. Now, once you start generating revenue and you think you're really profitable and the banks say no, you can come talk to me. But I'm not gonna, my interest rates are really high for unsecured lending. And I will basically I usually tell most people, do not take this loan because this is gonna bury you. Unless you know for sure you have really high margins and a really high growth rate in your business. So, but there is capital out there. So there's capital from CDCs out there. Justin Peterson is another source, a non-bank source for, especially for minorities, that some of the bigger banks do invest in. But yeah, and then sometimes the municipalities themselves have support for startup companies that are in their municipality. Like I know U City had some forgivable loans for small business for those companies that are in their municipality. So you have to kind of really dig around and look around. The other thing I would say that these two are really good at is do not diminish the value of marketing. That's something that I've seen a lot of Asian businesses think it's a waste of money.
Yeah.
But it is a really good investment if you do it the right way.
Yeah, it's funny. We now work with a couple agencies, and like when I had to explain the line item, my parents were like, "What?" Like, and again, and now when they see the diversity of new customers coming in, they're like, "Oh, they don't understand it," because they're like, "What is this money spent on?" And I give them the analytics report, and they're like, their eyes glaze over. I'm like, just trust me, it's working. I guess my thing would be is to work with someone else who where you see their business and you want to kind of be where they are, work with them. I mean, we started the first Thai restaurant, and now you can't throw a rock without hitting another Thai restaurant. And a lot of those folks started off working at King and I, and they got the experience, they got the know-how. I mean, I can't tell you how many amazing chefs cannot run a business, right? They can make delicious food, but they can't look at a balance sheet. And so just really understanding that, to run your own business is a really holistic enterprise. Like, I'm not good at everything the business does. A large part of my job when I first started was getting the professionals. I'm not a CPA. We hired a great CPA firm. I'm not an attorney, and as much as I want to get my brother's free work, I had to hire an attorney to go look at our, corporate stuff. And so just know that even if you're a founder, you can't be everything, and just to know what your weaknesses are and to either learn from, partner with, or hire someone who has that expertise.
Okay, so now we'll open for Q&A. Yes, please.
I know you mentioned a little bit about the dual identity, so I wanted to
Yeah,
ask a little
hold
bit
on
more
just a
about
second. We're bringing a microphone, I guess.
Sorry, folks, since we're recording this and we don't have the mic set up.
Yeah.
We can just go. Yeah, you can hear it.
Thank you so much. First, actually, I wanted to thank you all for the great talk. And touching on the dual identity concept, it's been a little bit difficult carving out my own identity while also trying to respect and uphold certain cultural or even religious traditions. So I just wanted to ask, in your own experience, have you found it easier to try and, I wrote it down, so would it be easier to try, did you try to fit in, or did you actively try to stand out and maybe, like you said, embrace the change, or the change that you bring to the environment? So I just wanted to ask, did you have trouble with that? Is that something that you thought about actively, or is that just something that came with time and experience?
So.
I think it's a constant, I don't want to say a struggle, it's a tension, even now with my parents. You know, I think what's great about coming to the States, but they were like, for them, they were like economic opportunity. That was their first thing. And now they've raised us kind of as Americans, and then there's that tension that's always there. I want to say that we've both moved each other in certain ways. Like I definitely take some cultural traits that they find that I find really appealing from the Asian side. But I was that rebellious West County kid, you know, like, you know, I just grew up mostly with very few Asian friends and non-Asian peers. And so when I mentioned when I went to school in the East Coast, I almost presented more as a Midwestern kid than an Asian kid. But identity is it's so multidimensional, and I would say don't let anyone define you. Like, again, Asian American is such a broad thing, and you know, being an immigrant in Los Angeles is different than being first gen with me. I'm expecting my first kid. My kid will have a wildly different identity as a biracial Asian kid in St. Louis in 2025. So there is no right answer. I think whatever makes you at peace and at comfort and allows you to thrive, take that path. There's no prescribed path.
Yeah, I would say when I was younger and still forming my identity, that was a big struggle. I was trying my best to blend in, and so my family's Taiwanese, and so I grew up with a Taiwanese community. All of my friends, Taiwanese friends, after they graduated from high school, they all left St. Louis. And they all went either to the West Coast or the East Coast. And one of the common themes with them was like they hated being stared at, right? And they wanted to be a part of a community where they blended in, right? And I was actually thinking about that because, yeah, I would notice people looking at me as a kid, right? I felt like I stood out. And then I was thinking, okay, maybe they're not, are they staring at me because I'm different or I'm ugly? Or are they looking at me because I'm good looking, right? You know, and because I have two older sisters who are gorgeous. And so, you know, I'd be walking along with them and guys were staring at my sister. I'm like, okay, well, maybe they're looking at me in a way that I didn't realize they were looking at me, right? And so I think a lot of it was, for me, a mindset. And first of all, you have to get to that point where you really understand who you are and be comfortable with who you are. And then go from that mindset. One of the interesting things was when I became the president of the Asian American Chamber of Commerce, we weren't really an important organization. People didn't even know who we were. And I learned something from a fellow sales rep at Regions Bank. I won't say his name, but he was our top producer. He's a good-looking dude, white dude, blonde hair, and everybody wanted to be around this guy. And he was able to generate business that way because he kind of carried that. And I was like, you know what? Maybe instead of having the mindset of, oh, I really wish people knew me, I shifted my mindset as like, you know what, people should, so I was about to curse there. People should know who I am, right? That's a mindset, guys, that a lot of white people, Caucasian, or non-minority folks have. They already have that confidence that's almost innate in them, and they kind of carry themselves around like, people should actually get to know me because I'm great, right? And that's something I didn't have. But during my presidency at the AACC, I think I shifted my mindset. It's like, actually, people should get to know me because our community has something to offer, right? And so that was a pretty significant change for me.
I think growing up, because my mom had a Chinese restaurant, and every year on my birthday, she'd bring in a whole tub of crab rangoons and fried rice that, like, everybody just loved us growing up. You know, my sister and I, we were like the kids whose parents would bring Chinese food every year for our birthday. So I think that was really helpful to feel like I was different and I was special, and you know, a lot of the kids in our community came to eat at our restaurant, so we kind of were known growing up. I fast forward went to Kansas City, and then that was when I really felt racism, and you know, people would ask me like, oh, you speak English so well, you know, like, this is wonderful. Where, you know, you'd always get that question, where are you from? And it's like, what do you mean? What would you like to know? You know, and I always tell them the whole spiel, you know. So then I kind of like in college that confidence was gone, because now I was Asian in an area where nobody knew who I was or my family was. And then I was really craving a larger city where there was more diversity, there was more foods. So after residency, I moved to Houston, Texas, where there was like all this great food, and I loved it. But then all the bad things with the traffic and, you know, missing my family and things. So in the end, coming back to St. Louis and really embracing my city and making it the way I would love to see St. Louis, you know, and seeing it where it is today is awesome. And then I think that it is with age. I think it comes with the confidence of just being comfortable in my own skin for who I am, being loved for who I am as a person, and embracing my, you know, two dual identities has been wonderful. And now seeing my children at school where they're in a class and their friends say to them, like, I wish I spoke 2 languages. Most of these kids in my class, you know, speak 2 languages. Why don't I, Mom? You know? And so it's, they have a different upbringing than we did in the 80s, you know.
Yeah. I think we have time for just one more question.
I have one question over here.
Oh,
Hi, Darcella Craven with the Office of Advocacy, which is an entity that helps small businesses with federal regulations that nobody knows about. But specifically, when I was appointed, I asked them, I said, you know, what is your outreach to minority communities? And Asian community, blah, blah, blah. I went through the whole thing. And the response I got back was, oh, well, we can print it in Chinese. And I thought, so you realize that the Asian community is bigger than that? And so that's been a fight. But my question to you is, you spoke about marketing and kind of getting the older generation to realize marketing is a line item. You know, also understanding federal regulations is a line item. And so I would really personally like to know, how do we continue to push out to the various ethnicities in the Asian community to get them to show up? Because the most important thing is that Black and brown faces and women's faces need to show up so that they can see you are looking at them. So that's my question.
thank you.
So that's a challenge for Omar Malik right here. He's the current president of the Asian American Chamber of Commerce. So yeah, that's one of the, not are we not monolithic as an Asian community? You know, at least when you go to Hispanic Chamber, almost all of them speak Spanish, right? Except for the Brazilians. But with the Asian community, and what the AACC has been very successful in doing is truly becoming pan-Asian. But we don't have a common language. We don't even have a common religion. We don't even have a common skin color, right? But the reason why the AACC is so powerful is because we have the same currency, which is business. And so introducing federal regulations or any kind of training is uniform, regardless of what Asian you are, because everybody does need to learn about federal regulations. Everybody needs to learn how to do a business plan, no matter what religion, language, skin color you are. And so that's the challenge that the AACC is trying to solve.
Yeah. Okay, one more.
Thank you. It's so great to hear your stories. Your stories was my story about 27 years ago. It's all about hard work, perseverance, not giving up, and here you are, you know, voila. So I think that's what it takes. We also part of, we're a 27-year-old company, PRI Global. We are a tech company. We're big into AI. It's interesting how we see people moving back from Seattle. We've been trying to hire from SLU. We're hiring techies from all over the place and all that. I was curious, you know, We have an end goal now. We think we can get to a valuation, I can maybe say some numbers, between $100 million to $500 million valuation in the next few years. And it's a journey, right? So I was kind of curious, what's your end goal? And what has the AACC done for you guys? And the T-Rex, just curious about that, the end goal. And again, just being diversity doesn't get you into business. You have to have a competitive advantage. And you have to have a something good, right? Otherwise, nobody's going to do business with you. Just being minority doesn't give you the right for anything, is what I want to say. But again, if you can maybe just quickly tell us your end goals, that'll be great.
Well, I think what I had mentioned before, obviously I'm pursuing financial independence. That's why I decided to go off on my own. But the longer I've been in this, because I still have to ask that question, why do I want financial independence? Because that means, what do I want to do with my time, right? And so as I've answered that question, which I think these folks all agree, I'm trying to make St. Louis a better place, right? I'm trying to make this place where I live get better. And so I work to live, not live to work. And so as long as I can continue to do some of the civic things that I'm doing and can finance my daily life and continue to do those things and make bigger impact, that's really my end goal. But as far as the AACC and other organizations, I think there's two things. One is that nobody can go at it alone if you want to affect change. You have to join forces with other people, which is why AACC isn't just East Asians. It's also South Asians, it's also Southeast Asians, and even Central Asians. And one of the things that we try to impress upon all the various Asian pockets of Asians in the St. Louis area is that when we work together, the voices get heard by our government and other important folks that actually need to hear. The Nepalese community is less than 1,000 people. But when they are part of the AACC, their voice can be augmented and amplified when we need to bring some attention to them. So,
as a physician, my end goal is just to continue to serve. It's a little bit different than I think other businesses, but continuing to be there for my community, taking care of patients, like that's my end goal. My dad's 83, he's still seeing patients when I'm out of town. So, but other than that, I think just, as far as the AACC, really getting to meet some kick-ass people, like getting to meet some really amazing people and just continue to serve is my end goal.
Yeah, I just, even though it is my family's company, I'm just a steward, right? My ultimate goal is to hopefully have a company that will make it to the third generation. I kind of mentioned St. Louis is a family business town. I've met so many people where they're their second, third, fourth generation. I think that's really special. That's unique to St. Louis. And you kind of mentioned other people coming into town. We have a lot more competition now, and they're not from St. Louis, and that's a good and bad thing. People look at St. Louis as a place to invest and grow their own business. So now you drive down Manchester Road and there's 6 or 7 new international grocery stores, and we welcome the challenge. And it just drives us to be better, because if we didn't have that competition, we'd be static. And so, I hope that our businesses will continue to grow and flourish for decades to come.
Any lasting, we'll stop for the Q&A. Any lasting thoughts that each one of you want to share today?
If anybody needs some help with aesthetics, I'm your girl. I have a $50 gift certificate. Just come see me. I'm happy to share it with you guys. But we love to help with helping you look your best and feel your best. So.
My main thing is I really desire the Asian community to be a little bit louder in our community than we have been. It's time for us to work together and be a larger voice in our community. because we do have something unique to say, and we have a unique perspective, and not only unique, but very valuable.
Take advantage of the rest of Startup Week. If you came just for this session, we're really glad you came, but also there's a great week of programming, so take advantage of it. It's really good stuff all around. So thank you guys for hosting us.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for coming. It was my great opportunity for me, and thanks Ben and also Matt and STL Startup Week for hosting us today. I think this is the first of its kind for Asian Americans to come out here and talk about the impact we are making on the region in all these different industry sectors. I'm into staffing. My panel here, healthcare, finance, and restaurants, and food industry. So really, thank you for coming, and it's great. Stay in touch and follow us on social media if you can. Thank you.
Thank you, Leenna.
Round of
Thanks.
applause.